Hey friends, it's Robin. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing a recent reads wrap up. I have 10 more books to talk about. I mentioned this in I think my last one, but I have been reading so many books recently. And so I'm desperately trying to catch up. So I'm sorry for all of the back-to-back recent reads, but I have 10 more books to talk about and I won't lie. This is a little all over the place. I have books that I DNF'd and absolutely did not like, all the way to a couple of 5 stars. So this is going to be a bit of a roller coaster. So let's just get the DNF out of the way first. I DNF'd Silk and Steel by Ariana Nash. This was for my Try Again vlog that I still haven't edited. So back in March, I did a series where I did a reader's guide to fantasy romance. And in April, I did a vlog where I read a book from each of the 4 subcategories that I did. And then in May, I was going to do a part 2 where I read the books that I didn't pick and kind of do a try again sort of deal. And I filmed the entire thing and it is sitting on my computer and I have not edited it. And I don't know if now it's out of date. I don't know if I'm going to post it. Let me know if you have an opinion one way or another, but I DNF'd this one at 9%. I was getting very uncomfortable while reading this. First of all, I didn't realize that this was more fantasy than romance. Apparently the romance in here is pretty light, and apparently you have to read the whole series in order to really get the romance, and I wasn't ready for that. I guess I thought that the romance itself in this one was totally wrapped up, and then this book just got really, really weird really quickly. Our hero at one point is talking to his mother and they're dragons, and she starts having sex in front of him and then trying to taunt him into joining them, and then he's getting all turned on by it, and I was so uncomfortable and I couldn't figure out if she was his actual mom or if it was some sort of I don't know. It got so weird and I was like, I'm out. I dipped out of this book so fucking fast and I have no interest in going back to it. This is an author that I still want to try because she does write a lot of fantasy romance, but this one was super weird and I was not on board. So DNF to that one. And then I read The Fiancé Farce by Alexandra Bellafleur, which I loved. I gave this a 4.5. This was so good. Alexandra Bellafleur is quickly becoming a favorite sapphic romance author for me. I think she does such good tropes. Her characters are super great. I love kind of the different themes and things that she throws in here. This one is a bookstore owner and a cover model that have a fake engagement sort of deal. And I really, really liked it. I loved the tropes. I loved the characters. I loved how bookish this felt without feeling pandering to the reader. Because sometimes when the characters are bookworms and stuff like that, it can almost feel like the author is trying to take the easy way out on getting us to connect with the characters. And that wasn't the case in here. I really loved how quickly these two just kind of got on board with the shenanigans of the situation. I loved their romance. It was super steamy and I really, really liked this. Like I said, this is an author that I've quickly fallen in love with. I read her entire previous series, which is right there, and I really hope that this is going to be a series as well. I don't know who would follow, but I want more of these characters because I loved them so much. So 4 stars to this one, but a really high 4-star. I don't know, maybe a 4.5. I can't decide, but this one was so good. So if you have read her Rate in the Stars series, I highly recommend reading this one. It was such a good time. In contrast to that, I read Not So Kind Regards by Clio Evans for that same fantasy vlog, and I gave this 2 stars. This was, what was this? Okay, what? I have no idea how to describe this book because I have no understanding of what the fuck this was. It started off fine enough. I was invested in the first chapter. In fact, this was almost the one that I picked for that monster romance vlog. This is kind of an office place MMF romance. So our heroine is a succubus, I think a succubus, but our heroine is a monster and our 2 heroes are witches and they work in the same office, and right at the beginning of the book, they are told about a merger and our 2 heroes are already in a romance. And this turned out to be Omegaverse, office romance, and some other weird shit mixed in. One of our heroes, one of our witch heroes, gets into the elevator. Like the moment that he locks eyes with the succubus heroine, realizes that they're fated mates, and so they go home together and they mate. And then our hero ends up noticing it and then becomes jealous and realizes he also wants to mate the other hero. And so the three of them end up having a thing, but then the merger at work starts getting weird and they're trying to steal the mated hero. And then our other two main characters are simultaneously trying to mate him and then save him from the bad guys. And then like one of the good guys goes missing. It was so fucking weird, okay? It was too much. Too many things tried to happen in this book. And it was so bizarre. Like, it was so bizarre. And by the time that I got to the end, I was like, what? What were we trying to do here? Like, was this supposed to be like a megaverse? Was it supposed to be a workplace romance? Was it supposed to be like, what was this supposed to be? Like, what was the goal here? Because the whole like bad guy kidnapping thing was just like thrown in at the end on top of the workplace, on top of the forbidden romance, on top of the fated mates. And I was just left really questioning what the goal of this book was. And I am absolutely not continue on with the series. I just kind of want to forget that I read this book, in all honesty. So, but then I read Glitterland by Alexis Hall finally. This was Alexis Hall's first book, I believe. I think Glitterland might have been his first book ever. And it recently got a reprint from Sourcebooks. And I loved this. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I will say, I thought this book was a little bit of a product of its time. It was written in 2016. And there were definitely some moments in here where I was like, with 2023 goggles going, do we say that? So there were just a couple of those little moments in there where I was just like, that made me a little uncomfortable. But again, it was written in 2016, so I am giving it some grace on that. But overall, it was really, really good. This is following our hero who has a bipolar massive depressive disorder, type 1, I believe. And he is really trying to just like get back into the groove of his life. And he feels like his life is a little outside of his control, and he sees everyone as like overprotective and trying to take care of him to like an extreme. And he feels like he has no control over his life because everyone is constantly concerned about whether or not he can handle anything. And he ends up going out to this bar and he locks eyes with our other main character. And the two of them end up having one night together, and our hero ends up running out on him in the middle of the night. Our hero with the bipolar depression is actually an author, and he is at a book signing. And the guy that he had a one-night stand with shows up, and the two of them have a completely opposites attract romance. They have totally different viewpoints on life. They're totally different personalities. One guy, I wouldn't say he's grumpy, but he is very isolated and unsure of himself, and the other guy is so fucking optimistic and bubbly and out there and extroverted, and the two of them just have such a good romance. This does have a lot of judgmental side characters, I guess. There are a lot of people judging both of them for their relationship and their social status and their mental health and all of these things that they kind of have to fight against. There's a slight age gap in here, and it was just really well done. I liked it a lot. I liked the audiobook. The accents are absolutely wild on the audiobook, so I really enjoyed that, and I do plan to continue on with the series. I know book 3 is a lot of people's favorite, but I enjoyed this one a lot. And then after that, I read a duet for that same fantasy vlog, and it was strange. So I read Frost by C.N. Crawford, and then I ended up reading the second book, Ambrosia. So Frost I gave 4 stars, and Ambrosia I gave 2.5 stars. So we started off on a high note. I really enjoyed Frost. This is kind of a very classic fae fantasy romance. Our heroine is human, and she ends up going to the fae realm and competing in this competition for the prince's hand. It's supposed to be like a fake engagement between the two of them because he can't touch anyone that he ends up falling in love with. If he touches somebody that he loves, they will turn to ice. hence Frost. So he ends up picking this half-fae woman from the human realm, kind of asks her to join this competition because he thinks that she's a total mess and he could never fall in love with her. Obviously, along the way, they fall in love. You get to see the whole competition, everything like that. It was a really good time. I enjoyed the competition. I feel like that is something that is so classic in fae fantasy romance, and it was a really good time. It was very tropey and predictable, and I enjoyed it. And then we get to Ambrosia, and this book was so all over the place, okay? Like, I get what the author was going for, but it was simultaneously too long, too repetitive, and like not enough. I don't even know how to explain it. We learn about the unseelie at this point, and so we cross into a different realm, and we learn some stuff about our heroine, and it ends up being this cyclical thing of our two main characters fighting, getting caught, being trapped, breaking out, and starting all over again. And so we do that a couple of times as they, to figure their shit out. And it was just very strange. Like, all of the choices that they made no sense to me at all. I even posted about this over on Instagram, but like, they finally make their grand escape and they get to the thing that they've been trying to get to for like the first 70% of the book. And they get there and they're like, we're being chased by the Unseelie. We're at this portal to go back to this other realm that we know is in utter chaos and about to fall apart. And they're like, yeah, we're being chased, and yeah, we need to take care of this, but this might be the final time that we get to touch, so let's take a moment and have sex right here. And I was just like, you're being chased. It took you like fucking weeks to get out of that, and you've been running to try to get to this point for 200 pages, and you're gonna take a moment to stop right now? Really? Are you sure? Are you sure that's the right idea? And then, like, just the way that everything kind of worked out was I felt like we were building up to this whole thing, and then none of it really ended up mattering. And I don't know, it didn't work for me at all. I didn't like the ending. This has one of my least favorite things in any book, in all honesty, because fantasy will do this sometimes, sci-fi will do this, thrillers will do this, but I hate when our characters sit down together and they wrap up everything that's been happening like the reader couldn't have followed the whole fucking story themselves. And so like they get together and they discuss everything that's happened and they explain it all to you. And I'm like, if you did your job as an author, I didn't fucking need those pages. Okay? Like it feels so unnecessary if you wrote the book in a way that made me understand it. And if you did do that and you still do this wrap up, it's so annoying because I know I was there for the whole book. I don't need you to wrap it up again in another 10 pages. I was there. I saw it. I read it. I've already gone through this. I don't need you to do a monologue for me. And I hate when this happens in thrillers where you have the bad guy that explains the whole situation. I hate when this is done in fantasy books where they sit down and explain the whole world to you. I just don't like these types of monologues because it feels like such a cheap way to explain your story to the reader. I don't like it, and I didn't like it in here, and it annoyed me. So in the end, I was just feeling very blah about the end of the book. I thought the first book was really well done. Book 2 was a bit of a mess, so. And then I read Resting Witch Face by Juliet Cross, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars, which is the lowest book or the lowest rating that I've ever given to one of these books. I've given every other book 5 stars, and I am shocked, okay? Don't get me wrong, I really, really liked this book. Like, I liked it a lot, but I was looking forward to this couple since book 1. Like, I really, really wanted Jules' romance, and it was a bit of a bummer. And like I said, I still really liked it, but it felt too easy. And this was something that I was worried about when I was reading the Necessary Evil series. If you were going to build up a romance for an X number of books, so this was book 5, I believe. So we've been building up this romance for 4 books, and it was too easy, in my opinion. These two pretty much get together in the first, like, I don't know, maybe quarter of the book, maybe even sooner than that. And I needed a little bit more angst to warrant the 4-book buildup that brought us to this romance. So in this book, we are following Jules and Ruben as they have a second chance romance. And in this one, they are traveling to try and convince people to help put the wolves, the werewolves, onto governing boards and things like that. When the two of them go on this trip, Reuben is determined to win Jules back, and it ends up happening just like right away. They just kind of fall into each other, which I didn't dislike, but it made it feel so odd in the juxtaposition of them being so against being together for 4 whole books. And so it ended up feeling like different characters almost, because they were so uncomfortable and angsty and there was so much tension between them in the first 4 books. And then in this one, he was pretty much like, okay, like, I want you back. And she was like, okay. And I was like, wait, what? You guys were so against this for 4 whole books. And then all of a sudden you're just like, we're together again. And it felt a little too easy. Even though I really liked them together as a couple, I liked all of the plot things that happened in here. I really liked how much these two cared about each other. I liked how he had to save her in the end. I really liked everything that happened in this book. I just felt like the tension between them was completely lost in this one, and I wanted that brought in to warrant the buildup of this romance. We're gonna get the last 4-star out of the way so I can just get to we can close this out with the 2 5-stars. So Gloam by Lily Mayne is book, oh god, 3? I think it's book 4 in the Monstrous series. And this was following the best friend of the hero in book 3, and he ends up traveling with this terrifying woman who has captured these monsters and is kind of like forcing them to protect her out in the wastes. Our hero is trying to save these monsters, one of which is Gloam, and Gloam has a cage on his head so that no one can see his face and he can't speak. And so they have this romance, and the only way they communicate is by writing things in a notebook, and our hero Rig is determined to save him. And a lot of crazy shenanigans goes on. There is a cult at one point. There is this menagerie of monsters that they need to free. It is a wild ride, and I really, really liked this one. This might be my favorite up until this point. I don't know. I think I say that about all of them just because the more that I'm in this world, the more that I fall in love with this world. It's post-apocalyptic without being too dark and heavy, because a lot of the post-apocalypticness of this has to do with the fact that the military took control and fucked everything up because it's the military. This is very anti-military, I will say, so just know that in case you're that type of person, I guess. But this is very anti-military. And so instead of trying to work with the monsters, they're just going out there, capturing them, torturing them, and trying to kill them. And crazily enough, the monsters don't like that and fight back. And so I have really enjoyed the series. But like I said, the more that I read it, the more I fall in love with the world. And so I feel like every book I love more than the last, just because I like all of these characters and this world so much. And I'm really, really enjoying it. So I've actually already started the next book, and I know that that is like a lot of people's favorite, so I'm really liking the series. 4 stars to this. And then we're going to close it out with the 2 5-star books that I had for this round. First was Leviathan Song by Elsie Winters, and I am so disappointed in myself for having this book on my TBR for so frickin' long. I read Green-Eyed Monster, which is like the little prequel novella, right when Leviathan Song was coming out, and I downloaded this book. I have downloaded this book so many times over the last like year and a half, and I just kept returning it because I kept putting this off, and I regret all of it. I regret all my choices. I should have read this right away because this was so, so good. I absolutely fell in love with these characters. I thought Elsie Winters did such a good job of creating a really unique fantasy world while still using kind of some classic fantasy ideas and characters. The characters themselves were pretty unique. The world was unique. Essentially, this is taking place in a world where there are different portals, and their fantasy world is called the Boundlands, and there are different portals across the Boundlands in the human realm and all these things that can take you to different parts of this fantasy world. Some of the creatures and fantasy creatures can leave the Boundlands and some cannot. It kind of depends on how fantastical you are. And then the different abilities and things like that that these fantasy creatures have, I thought was very unique. So we are following a fae woman who works in the human realm in Seattle, but she lives in the Boundlands, and that is kind of how she like replenishes her power. And she is a golemancer, and essentially she can create different objects and imbue them with abilities. But her biggest draw and like her most powerful ability is that she can create golems or golems. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. And she can give them a heartstone and create them to essentially do whatever you want them to do. And they can be protectors, they can be fighters, they can be all of these different things. And she has completely stopped creating them because she has some ethical issues with creating these creatures who could be used to do anything. And she doesn't feel safe doing that. But because she is one of the very few people who has this ability, people are constantly after her to try to get her to create these creatures for them. And it ends up creating this whole scenario where people are out to get her. And at the same time, she meets this guy who is a part mer, part siren, and he is completely humanoid. And he has a very negative association with his mer heritage. And the two of them end up having this romance with the caveat that there are reasons why he can't be around her and touch her too much. And I loved their romance. I loved our hero so freaking much. And the way that these two cared about each other and the way that they supported each other and helped each other, the friendship in here was so good. The best friend, I adored her. The heroes friend group, adored all of them. And I loved all of this so much. Like I said, the fantasy elements had a unique twist on them. The characters were so well rounded and just fantastic. They all had such unique personalities, and I'm obsessed. I'm completely obsessed. I've already downloaded book 2 and I am planning to read it in May because I can't get enough, and book 3 comes out soon-ish. And then the last 5-star book I read was If Only You by Chloe Leese, which no one's surprised because I'm obsessed with the Bergmans. It was funny because at one point in here, probably about like the first like quarter, I was like, oh no, is this gonna be like a 4-star? Like, is this gonna be my least favorite? This was amazing. I loved this. We're following the youngest sister who is now finally grown up, and she is struggling with the fact that her family still sees her as the baby of the family because she's the youngest sibling. And she's like, I am 21 years old at this point, maybe even older. She might have been 23. But she's in her 20s, and everyone is still treating her like a child, partly because she is the youngest sibling, but also because she dealt with some bullying in high school because she's autistic, and she just needs to get her family to understand that she is a grown adult and a self-sufficient woman in her own regard, and she doesn't need them to treat her like a child. At the same time, our hero is a hockey player who has this really negative like self-behavior because he grew up in this really toxic sort of environment, and he felt like getting in trouble was the only way that he could show up his parents and be like, what you say to me doesn't matter, I'm going to do whatever I want. And so he has this pretty toxic situation that he keeps putting himself in, and he needs to clean up his image before he gets dropped by the hockey team. And so him and the heroine end up having this arrangement where he is going to kind of muddy up her reputation a little bit so that people will start seeing her as an adult, and she is going to clean up his image and show everyone that he can be a stable guy. And so they end up having this friendship, and the two of them are so attracted to each other that it quickly devolves into a little bit more and a little bit more, and our hero starts realizing that he actually wants to be a better person for Ziggy. And as Ziggy is learning to stand up for herself and speak her mind, she is falling in love with him, and it is just so freaking good. I loved their romance. I loved how much like the hero completely and utterly worshipped Ziggy. It was so fantastic. And the way that Ziggy always supported him and understood where he was coming from and why he did the things that he did and how to support his like negative mindset about who he was without trying to fix him. It was just so well done. I love Chloe Lisa's writing. I love her characters. This whole world is so freaking good. And this series just got picked up by a publisher, and it so deserves it, and I can't wait to read the next book. I'm really excited for Vigo's romance. I would read these books into eternity because I love this world and these characters so, so much. So those are all 10 books that I read kind of recently. Like I said, let me know if you do still want that fantasy vlog. I did talk about all the books here, so if you are not interested, let me know. I won't edit it, I'll just delete the footage, but we shall see. But thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of these, if you've read them, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!